Hello, I'm Jeremy Webster with Collector's Maze, and I'm here with Brian Finlay from Drawn to It Studios. How you doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. On this kind of a gloomy Sunday here, we have thunderstorms sort of threatening to move in. So
Oh, we had crazy thunderstorms over the past couple of days, like shake the house kind of. I love it though. I get excited. I'm like, oh, that was a good one.
I'm in smack dab South Central Kansas. So we used to have a lot of that sort of weather here, and it's sort of kind of pulled back over the last few years. And as weird as it is to say this, I kind of miss it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's super cool. We used to live in Oakville, Ontario, in Canada,
Uh-huh.
and during thunderstorms and lightning storms, it'd be the kind of lightning that would dance across the sky, right? Not just bolt straight down.
Kind of
And we
going
would go
ripples
out.
across the clouds.
Yeah, and we'd
Yeah.
just be like, "Wow, this is so cool." And we don't get a lot of that here in the Maritimes in Canada, but we do get thunder, and that can be pretty impressive. So,
Awesome.
yeah,
So you are an animation veteran. Um,
yeah,
so
yeah.
how did you get into animation?
Well, sort of a loaded question. Not very different from a lot of other people that get into what they're passionate about. I'm one of the ones, there's usually two types of people. You got the people who fall into it accidentally, and they always tend to be the best at it. And they're like, oh, I didn't even intend to be an animator. So says one of the greatest animators ever in the world. Or you find people who have always wanted to get into it. That's the camp I'm in.
Hmm.
Ever since I was like 5 years old, I'd be watching the Disney shorts and Looney Tunes and all that. And I didn't even think about it from that age of it being a job. I just knew I wanted to do that, like I wanted to draw, and I would try to draw Bugs Bunny and that type of thing. And then as I got into high school, and the art classes were just like carving into potatoes and dipping them in paint and doing stupid prints, and
Yeah.
just as a kid with ADHD, it didn't keep me engaged, right? And that actually changed one day in junior high. My art teacher came in. I don't know if you remember, but they used to have big boxy TVs on carts with VHS players, right? And
Hmm.
you could hear it coming down the hall.
They wheeled them down, and they never oiled the
Yeah,
well,
yeah, and
coasters, the wheels.
and the whole class would get excited, like, yes, no work, we're gonna watch a movie, woo! And I felt that way during this art class. She wheeled it into the art class, and she said, okay, class, we're all done learning with a group of 7. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Group of 7, a bunch of famous painters, impressionistic, and, did a lot of landscapes. I found it super boring. So I'm like, okay, we're done with that. Great. What now? More potato prints? And she goes, today we're going to learn about color theory. I'm like, okay. And she goes, and to do that, we're going to watch The Lamb Before Time. And I'm in junior high, right? And it
Uh-huh.
had just come out. And I'm like, what, cartoon? Oh, best class ever. And during that class, we we watched the movie, and then afterward we analyzed the movie, and we talked about color theory and the psychology behind it, why a certain shot would start to move into red tones, and we talked about composition and how this tree is curving up like this to frame the character who's towards this third of the screen, and why. It was just all clicking for me. I loved it. I couldn't get enough. And then she followed that up with a comic book assignment that was just kind of a carry on of the initial, I would say, real education I got out of the art class. And that stayed with me all through junior high, just a period of about 2 weeks worth of art classes. And I wanted more, but we didn't have the internet back then.
Yeah.
So I couldn't just Google, how do you become an animator, right? So Disney's, not Disney, Jim Henson's dinosaur show
Oh yeah.
was sort of at its peak right around that time. And I started thinking, well, I don't know what I'm going to do to draw cartoons. And frankly, I wasn't that good at drawing at the time. Um, I've always been a late bloomer when it comes to drawing. It's incredibly hard for me. And so I thought, well, animatronics might be kind of cool. I mean, I could make puppets like Jim Henson and like in the labyrinth and like that type of stuff. How do I do that? Meanwhile, I live in a trailer park in Eastern Canada, like the furthest you can get from Hollywood. There's no everything around here is like a trade, sheet
Right.
metal work, carpentry, pipe fitter, all that kind of stuff. And I went and talked to the guidance counselor. I in high school, when I returned to high school, I actually dropped out for a year.
Hmm.
And then when I returned to high school, I went to the guidance counselor. I said, this is what I want to do. And they said, well, have you seen this newspaper article? And it was all about a local artist, local in our province, have been hired by Disney because he went to a college called Sheridan in Oakville, Ontario. And after he graduated, he got hired by Disney. I thought, oh, there's like a path. There are steps you take to get into animation. And so animation is a real job. I can make a paycheck if I follow the path. So I started to kind of toy around with the idea of submitting a portfolio, and that had me scared because I didn't have any confidence in my drawing abilities at all. And some would say I still don't. So,
Yeah.
but what happened was another article came out just a short while after that one about a college here in our province in Miramichi, and they were starting up their animation program. And I applied and I got in, and that really began to kick things off for me. And we had great teachers. We had our first teacher was Harold Duckett, who's no longer with us. He passed away, but he had worked on all the shows I grew up watching. So to me, he was like, I he'd be lecturing us, and the whole time I'm just staring at him, going, "He worked on Animaniacs or Tiny Toons. Look at him up there." Like I was totally starstruck with his resume, really, you know, and yeah, that just kind of kicked it all off.
When you and I were kids,
Yeah,
and it's almost a kind of a difficult thing to relate to people that are younger than us now, but the shorts cartoons in particular were like omnipresent everywhere. It wasn't just like the Looney Tunes. For example, when I was a kid, my grandmother would go to and we all have the stories about the corner VHS rental store and so on and so forth. But they had a lot of series of VHS tapes that were nothing but the shorts. Like I
yeah,
had, and she would tape them off before macromedia, kind of caused
yeah,
problems with that if you tried to do it. And it would be like 2-3 hours, and they would be like Donald Duck in the in his army or military, World War II era
yeah.
cartoon.
The propaganda stuff.
Yeah, and Mickey Mouse and such, and Goofy, and there were these collections and such. And you could run across them on TV. They were still fairly common to come across then, and a lot of that sort of um traditional is probably not the right word I'm looking for, but I'm looking for the word for something that was sort of like a basis that everything starts to bloom from.
Yeah, well, I think traditional really fits it well. I mean, you're talking about a time period when a lot of the people that worked on those cartoons were taught or had worked on the first cartoons. Like
Mhm.
they were of the alumni who developed the art form. And it would be so great if we had time machines and we could go back in time and say, hey, this room you have dedicated to this camera and this multi-plane camera that's takes up like 300 square feet and is, requires 2 stories. I can do it all on my iPhone
Yeah.
right here. They just couldn't envision that all the painstaking techniques they were developing and the skill required to pull it off would be, technology takes over everything, right? Everybody
Mhm.
becomes replaceable with technology eventually. And yeah, so I think traditional is a really good phrase, or the OGs of
The
animation,
OGs of animation.
Yeah.
We grew up and we had that. We had like um Chuck Jones, Tex Avery,
Oh,
guys like
yeah.
this. Some of those insane old droopy cartoons
Yeah.
that were like Tex Avery particularly had this insanity. Him and Jones.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
and you don't see a lot of those cartoons anymore. I guess some of them are showing on a I want to say Saturday morning MeTV thing. MeTV is sort of a national thing here that's pretending to be like a local channel.
yeah. Okay. Hey,
And
it's still a platform though,
yeah, it is.
you know.
And because it shows like retro programming, you've got
Yeah.
the immortal refuses to die for whatever Andy Griffith and stuff. But
Yeah.
Saturday mornings they've gone to showing a block of these classic cartoons at like 7 a.m. or something like this, my time. So
Yeah.
it's still out there, but it's not as visible as it was. Um,
Well, it's a whole different culture. I mean, Saturday morning used to mean something. It was so special.
yeah.
I mean, you'd wake up, crack of dawn, and there'd be a block of time, from early morning to noon, and you
Mhm.
knew what cartoons were coming on. You just prayed that one or two of them wouldn't be a repeat. But even if they were, it's all right, and you had your fruity pebbles or whatever you had, right? And I used to make a fort right in front of the TV, and Saturday was my day. My stepfather would let me have the remote, and my mother wouldn't bother me for whatever, go clean your room, not until after the lunch hour had passed. And it meant something. Now everything is just, yeah, I like that thumbnail, click. So
Yeah.
it's a totally different, I don't know. TV was it, remember when you would be flipping through the channels and you'd stumble on like Clash of the Titans just out
Yes.
of the blue, and you'd be like, "Oh my god, I got to watch this."
It
Right?
wouldn't be the beginning. It would be in the middle of the owl sequence or the Gorgon
Something.
sequence.
Yeah,
It would be
but
something nuts. Yeah.
it was special. You're like, "Oh, look what I found. I have to watch this."
Sunday
But
afternoon, stumbling across TBS and it's
yeah.
Jason and the Argonauts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that scene when Poseidon's like pushing the oh,
Yeah.
so it's so great. I don't know. I,
And sort of everything is sort of at your beck and call, like you say, on streaming or on the internet or something.
yeah, and everything has been refined and techniques learned, and so everything has been dialed up to this visual level that was just inconceivable even in the 90s. Like
Yeah.
if you look at the Michael Keaton Batman, like many of us say that's Batman. But if you compare it to the more modern Batman movies, even the cinematography has everything has just been dialed up to this visual sensory overload of eye candy, right?
Yeah.
And we would get just a fraction of that back in our youth, and we were so happy. Like it didn't take as much to impress or please us.
No, it didn't. The suggestion of something was fine.
Oh yeah, I mean
Yeah.
Jaws, right? Hardly
Yeah.
ever seen the shark, but everybody, whoa, it was a great,
Well,
the power of the mind.
once it turns up, yeah, the
Yeah,
scene where it gets the little boy is
yeah,
actually, I think I brought that up with someone the other day because Jaws is one of those movies. If it shows locally, I will see it. Unless I have something, I've seen probably a local screening of Jaws once a year for like, I don't know, 10 years. But that one scene where it sort of comes out and you got all the people in the foreground that are celebrating and stuff, and you get this scene that you can't quite clearly see what has the kid, but you see
Right.
that it's huge and it's turning sideways,
Yeah.
and that's like mind scarring the first time you see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
Awesome.
Lovecraft's old ones woke up, and you can't, something cosmic, something beyond your understanding has come
Yeah.
out. So it's
Yeah.
and that sort of visual hit. Everything is so detailed now that vagueness almost goes away when you contrast that to something like a Deep Blue. Was it Deep Blue Sea, or the Rennie Harlan film, and they eat Samuel Jackson before you think it should.
Right. Right.
They have to show the sharks all the time. They have
Yeah.
to see them all the time. Whereas in
All the
Jaws,
time.
yeah,
Every,
whereas in Jaws, they had to keep it kind of muted because the shark didn't work right.
that's right. Well, again,
Bruce.
creativity comes to the rescue, right?
Yeah.
Like it, and there's something to be said about that. I think like there are a lot of creative people I'm friends with now that when they come up against a problem, it's well, it's game over. We're shutting down. Game over. They just
Yeah.
stop whatever project they're on. And that's not the narrative you hear when you watch like a documentary about Spielberg during his comeuppance, right? It was
Right.
always, well, I couldn't do this, so I did this instead. As you know, made it feel like it was this, but I had a flashlight and duct tape, and I did this, right?
Uh-huh.
And
And
I think we need more of that.
there is a separation between like directors and cinematographers who have that sort of foresight to be able to go, this is an issue that we're not going to be able to do, so we need to find a workaround. If you
Yeah.
watch like a lot of old schlocky cinema, they didn't find a workaround, but they decided, oh, to heck with it, we're just going to shoot it like it is. Hence why it becomes old schlocky cinema, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a Party Beach and whatnot. Whereas you've got people out there like Spielberg or maybe Kubrick, some of these sort of people, when they're coming up going, well, okay, so that's not going to necessarily work. How can we reconfigure our whole idea so that this one idea can be presented in a way that's
Yeah.
plausible?
Yeah.
And it really separates the wheat from the chaff. Wow,
Yeah.
that's one of my grandfather's terms, but yeah, wheat from the chaff.
You're aging.
I know somebody tried to do a thing today where they said show your age by a store you remember, and I don't know if you had the store up there. I said TG&Y and realized that they went out of business, and I was like 5. I remember buying Wheeled Warriors there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody remembers those?
Yeah. Well,
So
you mentioned going to the video store and renting those what do you call it? Collection VHSs of all the cartoons. Do you remember going into a mall and seeing the little booth? You sit in, pull the curtain, put a quarter in, and you'd watch a black and white Heckle and Jekyll cartoon or Mighty Mouse cartoon.
Uh-huh.
You know, and it'd just be like a minute long, 2 minutes long. And, you know, but you sat in a little, just like those booths where you got your photo taken, right? But it was a movie booth, you know, and then movie booths took on a whole different meaning, you know, down the road.
Right.
But I like to think they started with cartoons, you know?
And before they became a thing in another market. But...
Yeah.
So you mentioned that it's interesting because your teacher sort of not just in an art sense, but in a cinematography sense, sort of launched you into that path, whether you recognize as that or not. That's something they'll probably hate you later. But you The Land Before Time is one of those great Don Bluth classic movies.
Yeah.
His art style's all over that. And I realized many years later that a lot of the animated movies that I loved as a kid were very Don Bluth centric. Pete's Dragon was real special to me when I was little. The Rescuers, The Land Before Time. And he's always been someone, animation wise, I really, The Secret of Nim. That's an amazing movie. And he did so much amazing work. And there's been talks lately about relaunching Don Bluth Studios. Have you much on that?
So Don Bluth, his assistant or maybe apprentice, Lavelle Lee. I can't pronounce his name properly.
Mhm.
But he's on social media a lot, doing live Facebook feeds of his training with Don Bluth, and every once in a while he drops a little nugget of hope that Don Bluth is going to resurge with a new animated feature, or there were talks of Dragon's Lair series and a movie and a fundraising like Kickstarter or something like that for it. And but all I keep hearing is a rumor mill.
Mhm.
I don't see anything, and I would love to. I love Don Bluth. I had in the early '90s, my for whatever reason, my father uh, bought a computer and was taking a course in DOS. I don't know why. I mean, he was a sheet metal foreman, and I don't know what he was doing, but for my birthday, he let me buy a computer game, and they had Space Ace 2,
Oh
Borf's
yeah.
Revenge. Yeah, for the operating system was DOS 5, and it came on like 100 floppy disks.
Floppy disks. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it ate up every bit of memory in the computer. But I would play that game, and I remember looking at it going, I wonder how they made this, because everything, even though it was kind of pixelated, right?
Mhm.
It still moved like Don Bluth, and I had played Dragon's Lair in the arcade, so this was an extension of that, just a very pixelated 8-bit one, it's
Yeah.
like, or it might have been 16-bit, but it was still pixelated. And I just remember playing it over and over. I could never get past like 5 seconds into it, but I would still play it over. And not because I really liked the game. I liked the visuals, the character
Yeah.
designs, how they moved, the backgrounds, and you know. And I'm a big Don Bluth fan for all of the art styles that are indicative of him. I'm a big fan of those.
He deserved a better. He deserved a better career end cap than the reception he got for Titan AE, and so did the film. Uh,
Yeah, well, Titan AE, I think they just got caught up in the what if tornado.
mhm.
Like, what if we did this because we have these tools available? And it's kind of what graphic designers did when Photoshop first came out after its first or second upgrade, and it had
Yeah.
the premium effects built into it, where you can make something look like liquid metal and all that with the click of a button. And they just all started using these like crazy because of it's I think the Titan AE just became a victim of the wow, what we could do with this technology.
Mhm.
And it's there are elements of Titan AE that are just classic Bluth, though, like that bug in the beginning that
Yeah.
oh man, I always fall in love with the secondary characters of a movie, like Pocahontas, Flit and the raccoon.
Uh-huh.
I was just like, oh, I want more of them, And I loved it when I had David Brooksma on my podcast, because he did those characters. I think he was supervisor on them, and I was able to just fanboy, you know, over the secondary characters that. But it's always the secondary characters for me, because they're, or like the cricket in Mulan,
In
right?
Mulan. Yeah.
The cricket really kind of, I don't know, it's so adorable.
The real color in a lot of those and it goes back further. A lot of the real color of those films is the supporting cast of characters, whereas the protagonist is usually a fairly straightforward,
Yeah.
very neutral character. Beauty and the Beast. Yeah, she has, she's a bookworm and such, but the entire castle is populated by this amazingly colorful, very, very character centric,
Yeah.
to the point of eccentricity. Like you've got what they did when they were human in the castle, represented in the shape that they're given. I've never thought about it like that. That movie's kind of genius in that way, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. They
It is.
get you thinking through it,
Yeah. I mean, when
the
you really start to break it down like that, but it was always the color characters
yeah.
in Disney. Even in a way, I referred to Pete's dragon. The dragon is a color character because if
Oh,
you
Pete's
watch,
Dragon. Oh man.
yeah, if
Yeah.
you watch the movie, it's a fairly straightforward musical. What is it? Sort of like a poor Southern sort of Oliver thing going on, and
Kinda. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the dragon's not omnipresent in the film. It's invisible for most of it, and shows up on occasion as a punctuation,
Yeah.
which is a very, because you remember they used to have like the record storybooks for the Disney. You'll know
Yeah.
it's time to turn the page when you hear the chimes
Oh
ring.
yes.
Yes, I grew up with those,
Man.
and you had those, and for stuff like Pete's dragon, the dragon's omnipresent throughout the whole book. It's
Yeah.
always there, and you
Yeah.
see the movie, and it's mainly the they're, the bad adopting family, and the kid, and the snake oil salesman guy isn't even in the book. It's all about saving the kid from the bad people, and then
Yeah.
the storm and the husband shows up, and so it's almost a different whole plot. But yeah, like they would have these really fantastic characters that sort of sit in the back somewhere, and they use them, they pull them forward at times that
Yeah.
they find them useful. Like maybe you need to break in a moment of lightness in something. Little Mermaid, um and you find yourself watching the films going, i want more of the I want more of Pete's dragon in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that movie was one of the staples of my whole DNA to become an animator. Pete's Dragon was just, and I still have a soft spot for it. I've interviewed a few different animators who have worked on it, and I'd be happy to talk about Pete's Dragon the whole time. Meanwhile, they don't want to talk about it at all. They're like, well, it's kind of whatever. I'm like,
Right, it's kind
no.
of treated that and Robin Hood are kind of treated like cast-offs in a way.
Yeah, yeah,
Robin Hood is another one that growing up I would watch that, like I swear it was once a month at my grandparents' house, because
yeah,
they loved the music in it.
yeah,
They'd come up in a very country music background, and so they adored the entire movie.
yeah,
And yeah, okay, the movie kind of sort of doesn't really have a real climax to it. It's got one, but it's not Disney,
yeah. It's a
brand.
pretty boring movie,
Yeah,
but I don't know. Something about it.
there's
Something
such a
about it.
charm to its look and sound.
There
Yeah,
is, yeah.
that is
And
that is
the
really good.
cast of voices. I mean, yeah. I mean, how many times can you hear Baloo's voice as a character, right? Before you're like, okay, it's Baloo, but he's brown this time, or but Disney did reuse a lot of voice talent, but
Mhm.
you go with what works and who you like to work with, right? But
You do.
yeah, I don't know. And my favorite Disney movie is Sword and Stone, and
That's a really good one.
I just love the character acting in it of Merlin, and the owl is just, I don't know. There are elements of movies that I hold on to. I won't necessarily be a diehard fan for an entire movie, but I take sequences and I hold them dear, like that is a gem right there. The very next frame, I can do without it. But from frame whatever to whatever, that's just pure gold. I love it. So
The idea that an animated film can be more than just the sum of its parts. It's a term I end up using a lot when I talk about it. Old Italian movies, is that a lot of them are plot-wise incoherent, because a lot of them are fairly exploitative of Hollywood films, but that they tend to have moments in them that are like, I think I usually describe it as like a Goya that moves.
Yeah.
They're very visually put together, even though they're shot like on a tenth of the budget that a Hollywood production is and such. You get these moments with great emotional resonance as opposed to like a coherent script or whatnot.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're emotionally connecting with a lie, because I mean, movies in general are lies, but animation is really a lie, because you think you're falling for a character that's moving around, but you're actually falling for a stack of drawings, right?
Yeah.
And they were carefully crafted to manipulate you into thinking exactly what the animator and director wanted you to think. So it's a big lie. But
Yeah.
we love them. We love them.
So then, you were mentioning like in the 90s, you had like Animaniacs, Freakazoid. There was that
Yeah.
Tiny Toons, that period there where I want to say Spielberg produced those shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they combined that sort of traditional concept with a bit more of a modern satirical take, both
Yeah.
on subject matter and on other subject matters. And it's about then, and it could be earlier, you would probably be actually more knowledgeable on this than certainly I am, but when you start getting the influence in of say 3D CGI effects and anime type
Yeah.
animation. So in terms of like animated entertainment, how do you see that evolution when you start seeing these different styles and different art styles start to develop and get incorporated in? Because obviously we've had blown out anime this, and we've had blown out 3D um 3D stuff, which is Pixar and the stuff DreamWorks does on occasion and whatnot. So how do you sort of see the evolution that went between the what we think of as a traditional 2D animated style to incorporate these other facets?
Well, I think I compare it to like those old B movies, where you'd see the string on the spaceship,
Yeah.
and you'd see the firecracker go off inside it. And in the beginning, things look rough and clunky, and you watch them, and you like, if you watch Toy Story today, you would be like, ooh, wow, you know. It's kind of like going back and trying to rewatch a show you grew up with, and when you do watch it, you're like, oh, it doesn't hold up. Well, there's a evolution process of technique, technology, and the artist's ability to push the envelope,
Mhm.
and you just have to give it time to fall down, get back up, and try again. It's like trying to teach a kid how to drive a bike,
Mhm.
there's a bunch of clumsy attempts until finally there's a graceful execution and off they go. And I think all art form is like that. It comes in waves, right? There will be something new will come around that will revitalize, but also it will make people start doing things a different way. Like Beethoven wasn't doing uh, Great Balls of Fire on the piano, right? But
Mhm.
same instrument, many years later in another artist's hands, after a certain cultural evolution has happened, it becomes a whole different thing. So I think with animation, it was doomed to fall victim to technology the instant it started. And by falling victim to it, I mean, maybe it's the wrong way to put it, but technology is the driving force of animation.
Mhm.
Even though it didn't really feel that way for many decades, it was just pencil, paper, and animation disc, and flipping the paper and drawing. But that was the limitation of technology. Eventually technology gets to a point where it affects art. And that is, I was watching Star Trek a couple days ago, and there was an episode where a kid had been given a tool that looked like a pen, and just had to wave it over a wood chunk or something. And as they did, the laser sculpted what the kid was thinking of. This is what they describe in this in the storyline. And just like most things in Star Trek, I'm sure we're not very far from something that can do something like that, you know? So tools change all the time and the techniques change, but though all this stuff that's changing, the story part is the only thing that stays the same, meaning, somebody wants to tell a story. How they tell it is what changes, but they just want to tell a story. In the end, we're an audience waiting for a bedtime story.
Right.
It
is interesting to watch the tools change over time. It's like you'll see comic books are a good example of that. You'll see somebody who might have been the artist on a comic book 30, 40 years ago, Marvel, DC, and you'll see them now doing the same thing they were doing on a giant sheet of paper on one of those digital pads with a stylus.
Yeah. And that's what I have in front of me right now. I have a big Cintiq right in front of me. I've actually never worked in an animation studio on paper, with the exception of one project at Disney. That, everything has been through a drawing tablet. So
it's just amazing how things change like that.
Yeah. And now they got that VR, I've never tried it, but I've watched videos of Glenn Keane drawing Ariel in 3D space, and I'm just like, wow,
that's an interesting one, because they would use what was it? And it was something that rotoscoping, like Fire and Ice, the movie Fire and Ice, comes to mind for that, and I think Heavy Metal. And now we're getting into weird areas of animation. I apologize, but
that's cool.
They use that technique, rotoscoping.
Yeah.
Who's the guy who did Bakshi? Bakshi did Fire and Ice.
I can't remember if he did that one. Probably that one.
It was the
kind of looks like his work. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I'd have to Google it.
And it's kind of interesting that they were looking for a realistic human movement in those movies, and now we've got to a point where we actually put people with the sensors and in a VR environment to film them, the circus performances, which they didn't they give him like a special Oscar a couple of years ago for his mocap work. So deserved.
Forget about that. He's a good actor, period.
He's amazing. Yeah.
But I don't know. It's crazy. I mean, you can model. So they have programs now where if you don't know how to 3D model, in terms of extrusion and that type of thing with a cube, they have 3D programs where you're given like a ball of clay and use different brushes and you sculpt a dragon or whatever, right? Get it ready for the movie or production. And they have that type of thing now in VR. So you put your VR headset on and start sculpting clay, and you technically can sculpt a production ready model to move on to the next stage of production, all by like, could you imagine in a studio, you got a headset on and you're just doing this all day and people are walking by you like, what the,
Yeah. What are they doing?
Yeah. But I mean, that's a lot of people are, trying to improve that technology. From what I understand, it's a little bit clunky right now, but I mean, every upgrade is leaps and bounds better, and they can do a full scan of anybody. You stand in a thing and they just go zip, zip, and they make a toy out of you. So
okay, that's an amazing thing to me, is how far we've come with that sort of technology.
Yeah.
When we were kids, the Kenner Star Wars figures, for example, they vaguely look like the person. And now you go and the same toys like 20, 30 years later are like basically perfect sculpts of Mark Hamill. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we owe that to Todd McFarlane, because if you go back and watch The Devil You Know, I think it is, his documentary talks about, you know, the whole Spawn thing, getting into Image Comics and his background and that, and how he launched into toys, and he would just tell the sculptors it doesn't look like him. They're like, yeah, but it's small. He'd be like, no, just keep moving the clay around till it looks like the guy. They're okay, and they come back, and he'd be like, there you go. Now it looks okay, good. And that became, you know, the new bar was set. So yeah, I think I love that documentary. Creative people have to go watch that documentary.
What was the name of it? The Devil You Know?
Yeah, The Devil You Know. It's on YouTube.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a nice one to recommend.
Yeah, it's really good. Really good.
I haven't seen that one. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
McFarlane Studios or McFarlane Toys in its early years did so many things.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd have companies like NECA today if they hadn't come out and go, you know what, we can do stylization and we can do realism beyond just what Hasbro throws out on a thing.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the podcast.
Excuse me. Okay, well, Drawn to It podcast has been on hiatus for a couple months while I've been filming the Drawn to It Behind the Screens TV show that I got picked up with Bell up here in Canada. And that's a show about the animation production process. So about, you know, script writing and character design, storyboarding, all that kind of stuff. Every episode is a different step of the process. And we use an animated short as sort of our working project through each episode. So that came about because of the podcast. And so Drawn to It podcast is basically I interview creative people who have worked in animation and or film. And I always try to get guests that have at least 1 degree of separation to animation. Okay. So if I get somebody who's only worked as a matte painter in film, they have a story in their career that is related to animation in some way. And that's worked out really well. I've had some really talented creative legends in the animation industry on the podcast. David Pruxma, I've had Travis Blaze, I've had Tom Cito, Tad Stones, who created Darkwing Duck. You know, like it's so great to hear their stories, because these legends, and I had Emily Giuliano, who worked with Don Bluth in his garage on many of the early projects when he left Disney, you know, and so she shared all those stories, and I'm like, wow, man, I just sometimes I feel like I was born like 10 or 15 years too late, you know, like I just missed that window of awesome opportunity creatively. But yeah, it's a blast. And I feel I started the podcast because I have really extreme anxiety, and it was getting to the point where I didn't want to leave the house, and you know, and I just needed some way of overcoming my, so I have anxiety, and then I have a panic disorder about the anxiety. So I have anxiety about my anxiety, I guess. It's crazy. I'm in therapy now. It's going rough.
And we spent 15 months and yeah.
So yeah, it you know, doing the podcast has sort of reintroduced the idea that talking to people is okay, and that I'm not the most vile thing on the planet, which is something like when you have depression and anxiety, your mind plays on itself, and you can end up having terrible thoughts about yourself. And when I talk to my guests on the podcast, I come to find out that a great many of them have the same thoughts, and that then it became a thing of, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the freak I thought I was, because this person who's done, this whole lifetime achievement of great stuff, the whole time they felt like they had imposter syndrome through the whole thing, and I'm like, oh, that, not that I wish that on anybody, but it is nice to know that I'm not the only person who feels they're in a constant state of fake it till you make it kind of thing. And, you know,
That's an interesting point to make. There's a meme that circulates around on Facebook every so often, and it was from I think it was an interview session. It might have been a discussion because I've seen the video before, but it's George R.R. Martin and Stephen King,
mhm,
and they're in a discussion, and the meme, because you know how memes are,
mhm.
puts a very complicated thing in a very simple.
Yep.
Martin says something to King like, so you get like this many words a page done every day, because I think King averages something like 4 to 6 pages a day or something like that,
Mm.
and that's how he does. And he has a new book every 6 months, it seems like.
Right.
And King says, yeah, that's what I aim for. And Martin says, and you always hit that? I mostly do. And Martin says, so you never have days or you wonder, should I do this? Am I doing the right thing? Is this any good? Should I ever been a plumber? And it cuts to Stephen King with a big no on it. And I see a lot of people, out there like get a real kick out of the idea of King saying no, but there isn't a whole lot of empathy for Martin's position,
Yeah.
because there is that thing. If you're a creative, am I imposter syndrome? Am I
Yeah.
this? Is my work really worth the thing like this? And it's easy to get mad at Martin because it's been a decade since his last book. But he
Mhm.
has, no one ever stops and goes, but he has a project slate and he has this. And then most of your writers, the old joke was, and I don't remember what writer it was. Somebody asked a writer how he's doing on a project. He said, it was terrible. I asked him how much work he'd done, and he said 10 pages or something. I said, but that's actually great. He said, yes, but I don't understand the order the word should go in. There's a thing with artists.
Yeah.
Is my work actually good? And you can have, the sort of crushing self-questioning depression, such like this. And then you've got the over exuberant, everything I do is gold, ego case. So
Yeah.
not that King is, but you get the difference. King is a workingman's workingman. He just sits
Yeah.
and writes things. But Martin has a self-questioning process. And a lot of people don't understand people who have a self-questioning process, particularly if a person picks their direction themselves. They don't have a
Yeah.
manager over them going, do this. They have to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I crave the day when I do a drawing, I go to bed at night, and I wake up in the morning, I look at the drawing and I still like it. Like, because I believe if I can get to that point, maybe then I'm actually quote unquote good. You know what I mean? But
Uh-huh.
because is something about the artistic mind, your skill, even thinking about drawing can improve your drawing, kinda. You're always analyzing, right? And so I'll come back to my artwork and be like, oh, now all I see is just all the mistakes, but it's deadline. It's got to go out.
It's got to be done, right? Yeah.
Got to go out, right? And art is never done, just abandoned. Um,
That's a
so
thing, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it is. So I'm just craving that day when I wake up in the morning and I like what I drew the day before. And I haven't had it yet, but I'm trying to get there.
Once a year or so, or once every couple of years around October, just on a whim or whatever you want to call it, propulsion to do it, I will read King Salem's Lot. I consider it a really great modern horror novel. And it for me, it's probably a peak sort of thing. And I've seen him do comments on Salem's Lot, and he's like, it has a lot of issues. It has a lot of stuff. There's too many, So I'm done with it, but I don't want to be done with it. Or
Yeah.
looking back at it um, as slightly malformed or erroneous or something. I don't think that's something a lot of people understand about artists, about people who create content of some form,
Yeah.
be it in a visual medium, writing medium, musical medium. You hear supposedly Kurt Cobain did not like the way Nevermind sounded.
Right. And
Yeah.
everybody else is like, oh, I love it.
Yeah. So there's an actual thing there
Yeah.
with creative people that I don't think a lot of people actually tune into. But I think that in its way, because I come from an intensely introverted side. So a lot of what you say rings a big bell with me, and I'm a website developer. So a lot of my day is where I work, I have basically a cave, and I lock myself in the cave for 8 hours a day, and occasionally someone messages on Skype. So to break that dis-ease with dealing with people and such, I will do things like set up live training courses or things like that, and it helps with that. You end up ending your time exhausted, but if you realize you don't do that, you just end up continuing down that narrow path, and you do need that. You need that side to function better.
Yeah. And I've learned that doing the podcast, and I'm excited. I'm booking new guests for October, and we're going to start back up and go for another 70 some episode season of just a lot of inspiration. It's all about trying to pull inspiring stories out of the guests. A lot of times they come on and they don't know what they're going to be talking about, and I don't make a list of questions. I like to organically kind of go into things. So if they say something, it'll cue me, and I'm like, hey, I want to know more about this. And the one podcast, my biggest regret from Drawn to a Podcast is that I had William Sadler as a guest, and he played Death in the Bill and Ted movies, and that's just one role. Okay, like
he was a busy guy. Yeah,
he played the president in Iron Man 3. I mean, huge roles. He's done it all, and it was an amazing podcast. The conversation was just epic, and when I got to editing it, come to find out that there'd been an error with Skype, and none of the audio was there.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah. So he has said he will come back on and we can redo it, and I'm very grateful to him for that. Problem is he's so busy, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
He's one of those actors. He's a working man's actor. He's always busy because he's so good.
Humble. Yeah. Super humble, and his whole backstory is just awesome. He was a dream chaser, and he made it. He was one of the ones that made it, so it gives you hope.
So you got the TV show. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so the TV show, Drawn to It Behind the Screens, it just basically, it's the idea was a reality show mixed with a little bit of Bob Ross, and that sort of evolved into this step-by-step on how to make an animated cartoon, 2D animated cartoon. And I've got some great guests on it. I have David Pruxma is on it. Brian LeMay is on it. He designed the characters on Inspector Gadget. I have Emily Giuliano's on it, and she did cleanup work for all kinds of Disney movies and Don Bluth, and she animated on movies too. She's one of the rare people who prefers cleanup over animation, and I found that very intriguing. And I actually have my art teacher on it who brought in The Land Before Time.
Oh, really?
I went and I filmed an interview with her, and I had the opportunity to thank her face to face for, creating a moment, a pivot moment in my life that, like, when people ask me, how'd you get into animation? I think of that day.
What was
So.
she like seeing you come back all these years? I want to do an interview with you for the time.
She was so super cool about it, and just happy to talk about the old days. And she was, I think she was being nice by saying, yes, I remember you, but she might have actually remembered me, because I had a little side hustle in junior high where I would clean my teacher's cars for $2 at lunch hour, and I used to clean her car too, so she might actually remember me. But most teachers wouldn't remember me for the right reason, that's for sure. But no, she was super great and happy to talk about what made her use it as a teaching tool. And off the record, she would say that a lot of the curriculum that our teachers teach, they don't like teaching, because it's so boring. It's just not. You're in a room to get creative, right? And they got to teach stuff that's just ugh. It's hard to get fired up about, but it's mandated that they teach.
The weird thing with you're doing an expressionistic medium style, but
Yeah.
but you introduce it under means of absolute control. The irony. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. So, it was really great. And yeah, we went up to her house, and she has a beautiful backyard. And yeah, it was a moment that I really treasured, because a lot of people don't get the chance to reach back into time like that. And
No, and
so,
directly thank someone for like
yeah,
the impact that they really had on you in your life.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you got negotiating a network or a schedule, or is it going to be online?
It's going to be on Bell 5 TV1. It's a cable provider up here in Canada. It's their version of local access, but it's sort of every Bell customer in Canada has access to the content, and it's a on-demand platform. So they have a lot of different shows in different categories: lifestyle, arts, sports, all that. And basically, they have a program where people can pitch TV show ideas, and if they like it, they will start talking with you and eventually green light it if you get to that point, which we were able to. So no pressure. So, well, because you end up having to do everything yourself, right?
Yeah.
And you don't get a lot of money to play with, not like a big studio like NBC would give a TV show, right?
No,
So
not
yeah,
even maybe a PBS type show, public broadcasting down here, where they do a lot of topical stuff like that.
right, right.
You end up with a lot of craft / arts type shows. For example, during the pandemic, I was moved to work from home. And a lot of days while I'm sitting there just working, I have something on for noise, basically.
Yeah.
Because I have music or something going on. But a lot of times I would leave it on some channel, usually like with B movies or something, just playing in the background. Sometimes I'd have it on PBS, and you'd have people on there doing sewing or any number of different quilting, and just
Yeah.
stuff like that. Or you'd trip into the black hole that they have for East Coast home renovation,
Yeah.
house and
Yeah.
whatnot. So they have a lot of content like that, but I imagine that the budgets, handling everything within a budget, is probably pretty challenging.
Very challenging. And on top of that, you still got to work a full-time job. And it's tricky. Time management is what it comes down to. And if you're a person with ADHD, man, some
Yeah.
days can be super tough. The other day, my son was walking around, and he has ADHD too. And he was walking around and he goes, I have to do this, but I feel like I can't do that before I do this. And they're not related at all. And I was walking around doing the exact same thing. And the two of us were doing a lot of nothing, but we felt like gotta get it done. And nothing was being done. But man, did we feel like, oh, we gotta get something done. So,
Yes. I have interesting days like that. My son was diagnosed with ADHD, and he had very much like that, or just little things. As a kid, he would collect things like toys. He wouldn't actually play with them, but he had to have the whole set.
yeah.
Before you could actually do something with it. And it
my
can
son
be
right now is trying to build a biosphere in the basement
Really?
with bugs he gets from outside, seal them in a jar forever, he says, and they create a biosphere. I don't know. He watched a video online on how to do it. And I'm just like, okay, whatever floats your boat. The day before, he was like, gotta buy a canoe. I'm like, what? Like every day there's a new definite have to, and I relate to that because I'm the same way. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, gotta make a comic book. The next day is like, oh, I'm gonna pitch a TV show, and there's like no bridging between ambitious ideas. It's
just a leap of faith at the time, right? You just charge right into it.
yeah.
That's I have some I identify with this greatly.
I think a lot of people that work in a creative field do. And I think it's part of that secret sauce that makes it work.
I think that there are a lot of people in the world that have this dream of being their own boss. That sort of dream of the independence that come with it, that don't actually understand the challenges that come with being your own boss. Being your own boss doesn't mean you wake up at noon and diddle around the day and put stuff off, because all of your worst work habits will exhibit when you are your own boss. Every procrastination, bad organization, things like that. When you actually don't have that manager or that person in the background that helps keep your work life organized, that's all on you now. So there are certain challenges there. So I think there's a bit of a romanticized notion as to, wouldn't it be great if I was just, you sure you want to do that?
Careful what you wish for. Totally.
And you've got a website for your studio, Drawn to It Studio.
dtistudios.ca.
And we're going to leave everybody links for the podcast and for the homepage.
Appreciate that.
In our description stuff, so everyone can check you out. So what are you guys doing over on your studio?
Well, right now we're working on the TV show. We've done a couple of paid promo videos that have been fantastic. A few artists have called us up and said, would you film a promo video for me to post on social media, my website, whatever. And we've been happy to do that. And that came about just as we got the new camera gear. So it was really good timing and gave us a great learning opportunity to kind of put them through their paces. But once we're done with the TV show, we're hoping to do some more documentary work. I want to really get into the idea, like I'd love to find some creative people that we could follow around while they're pursuing a certain goal, like maybe a band that's recording a album and or a writer that's trying to pitch a TV show, and follow them around and document that process, good or bad, and see the emotional journey they go on.
That would be really awesome.
Yeah, I'm really hoping to do that because a lot of people don't see with creative people, a lot of people see the end result, but they don't see the mountain of disaster it took to get it,
or the mountain of disaster or whatever, the mountain of the struggle itself becomes something legend but it's not something in a human light. Like you can talk about the issues Orson Kane had making Citizen, or Orson Welles had making Citizen Kane for, you know, a million years and such, but it's all a compression of his ego and the legendary stories, but it doesn't really click on that human level, the day-to-day grind of doing it. It just becomes legend. People, and the bad thing with the legend is it runs in archetypes. It's either really grand or it's really not grand. There's a villain, there's not a villain, but it doesn't put the whole dimension in of a creative process like that. You know, you can talk about what Led Zeppelin recording this album, throwing televisions out a window, and that's cute and it's a neat story to tell at parties, but how did we get to this point? What's the real, you know, human thing? They woke up the next day feeling terrible, hungover, you know, none of that. It's only the glamorous attention getting stuff.
And I want to find out what was the mud and swamp and the belly crawls that were all stepping stones to this tremendous moment for a person, or potential tremendous moment. And sometimes my hope, okay, it sounds kind of bad to say this, but I only say it because I've been through it and I know the extreme pain of it. I would love to document somebody who put in 100,000% of their soul into trying to achieve a goal, but it doesn't work, at least not the way they think it should. A different opportunity comes because of it, but that one thing they went after was a bust. I want to feel that. I want to document that journey of the emotional roller coaster of that.
That's an actual thing, and we've got to a point, I think, and I don't know if culture's always been like this, where the arts tend to be almost seen as disposable or cast away in a way, you know, and some of it came in with the usual gripe for this is when albums went to downloadable MP3 and the experience of opening, you know, a CD case or a gatefold, and the art and all this started to disappear in favor of, well, I can just download the one song. I don't need to listen to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon in continuity with a thing, you know. There was a thing there, the different aesthetic between me going to the local rental store and seeing, you know, wow, they have Day of the Dead, an old George Romero movie. I haven't seen this, and I get it home and I find that the tape's off the thing, so I use Scotch tape to fix the tape and such, and get, you know, a grainy image or something like this. It's like, but I, you know, I waited 3 years to watch this after first hearing it. Versus, well, I got one and it has a slight digital artifact at 35 minutes, and I think it's garbage because of this. The idea that there's a different appreciation for what media is. We see a lot of movies and such come out, because I used to do film criticism here in Wichita, and it's amazing that you have a lot of films come out, and the worst response I would ever get when I ask somebody, so how was that movie? Is okay. What does that mean? That means really nothing. But that's how I think a lot of people will see something that comes out, and somebody makes an album or a movie or a TV show or something, and they go, it's all right. But it's all right does not reflect anything coming up to the point of its release. That thing that you sort of passively watched on Netflix for a year because you couldn't, you know, you really couldn't think of anything better to do with your time, was somebody's passion somewhere along the line. And to them, it isn't, it's okay, you know.
That's right.
I think that's an angle that people could use more respect. It's just a thing. It's, you know, art is not a piece of styrofoam, but it becomes very easy to see it as one.
Totally.
So that would be really cool to see.
Well, fingers crossed. And I'd be happy to reach out and get some advice from you when we wrap things up and think of that next documentary project. But yeah, that's where I want to take the company, make a documentary, find a home for it, and continue to move away from working sounds weird, but I have to figure out how to move away from working as an artist in the animation industry to more directing, producing, because I have essential tremors pretty bad in my hands, and it's almost impossible to draw for any length of time now. So I need to pivot in order to keep earning for my family. So the challenge is there.
The challenge is there.
Yeah.
That in itself is a story to be told.
Yeah, but I've already been. Listen, I've spent so many hours editing my fat face on my computer.
Yeah.
I need somebody else to edit.
I do not like looking at myself on a camera. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my son's like, because my son is my main camera operator, and he goes, Dad, what shot do you want, wide or tight? I'm like, for this one, let's go wide. I get it back to the editing suite, and I'm like, I forgot I have a ginormous gut. Wonderful. Now everybody can see it in its full pride. Yay.
Was it they say that the Star Trek, if they wanted the epic heroic shot, it was from the top, and if they wanted the
yeah
if they wanted the vulnerable Enterprise, they shot it from below.
Yeah. Well, just today we were filming, and my son goes, how do you like this framing? And I looked at him and I go, you got to crank that camera up higher. And he's like, oh, okay. And he starts cranking the thing.
Tell him it could have been it could be one of the BBC cameras from the 60s where it weighed 80 pounds and they put it on someone's shoulder.
Oh, geez. Just the tripod weighed 80 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, Brian, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And, I'd love to have you on my podcast sometime.
Oh, that would be great. I'd love that.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at the show's premiere, if you'd be open to it, we'll be happy to do it again. You can tell us a little bit about the misadventures that occur in television production.
Yeah, I'd love to. I've learned a lot.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian Finlay. Drawn to It podcast, Drawn to It studios. We'll look forward to seeing you in the future.
All righty. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.